Alright, laddies and ladettes. Our fourth battle of Killer vs Killers fight will be between Nurse and Freddy. Alright, just because I feel as though, it's important to highlight this with every video, so any newcomers know what's happening. We'll be looking at the same four categories of the killers: stats, strength, agility, and law. So starting with Nurse, she's average height, has a crippling speed of 3.85 meters per second, and a tear radius of 32 meters. The Nurse's stats are quite different to other killers, her base speed being the obvious divider between her and other killers. The Nurse actually has a slower speed than survivors, which is quite bad when you think about it, because that means without the help of her power, she is physically incapable of capturing a survivor, let alone a killer, because it's killer vs killer. Her power, however, does provide a lot of support for Nurse. Spencer's last breath, which is what it's called. This allows the Nurse to surely enter the spirit world and blink forwards. She's able to do this only a few times before entering a stage of fatigue, but with this ability she's able to phase through walls and travel a great distance forward, allowing for easy escapes if needed or inflict an unpredictable attack. The Nurse, however, does not do this sneakily, letting out a great screech with each blink she performs, likely due to the pain she would be enduring performing her power. Overall, we're giving the Nurse a 9 out of 10 for stats, because she has an amazing ability of being able to phase through walls and basically teleport to any position she pleases, but is let down by her terrible movement speed, being almost completely reliant on her power, which without a power would probably most likely place around a 3 or 4 out of 10. So as bad as I feel for this, I'm going to give the Nurse a 3 out of 10 for strength right now, which I can tell you is really going to hurt the Nurse with her scoring, but I have to be honest with these. Looking at Nurse, you can tell she doesn't have a strong build and is even quite skinny for a woman, just in overall strength, appearance, sorry. I can't even give her points for being able to break pallets to pick up survivors, because she's completely reliant on her power, using it to break the pallets to pick up the survivors. So she doesn't even use her legs, using her power to float around, meaning she would have very little mobility in her legs. The only sign of strength we get from Nurse, and the reason she's getting a 1 out of 10, is because of her Mori and Law. Demonstrates that she at least has the strength to strangle a person to death, giving her some points. Because as I've stated in previous things, I'm not going to be counting their power towards things like strength and agility. Agility is almost the same, except I'm going to be a little nicer here than I was with her strength, and give her a 4 out of 10 for agility. Like I said before, Nurse doesn't actually perform any actions herself, and utilizes her ability in order to achieve anything she sorts out to do, which visibly has resulted in Nurse being quite weak physically, which she gets more points over strength here, however, is because of her recovery over using Spencer's last breath. It's obvious that using her power has a great toll over her and is hurting her to the point where no matter who is using it, it's going to affect you badly. Yeah, she still recovers swiftly, only letting it herself be fatigued for a few seconds and gets right back into it, meaning her respiratory system must be quite in check for that to happen. Our final category for Nurse is her lore, and I may say she has a very nice lore and is the kind of stuff you want to hear in a killer's backstory. Basically, all the Nurse ever wanted in life was to live with her children in a house built by her husband Andrew. This all fell, however, when her husband was injured at work and didn't make it, sadly. This forced the Nurse to get a job at Crota's Parent Asylum, where she would see horrid things over 2 decades. Her mind reaching the limit and not being able to take it anymore, decides to purify the people in the asylum. That night, over 50 patients were killed, along with 4 staff members, majority of patients having strangle marks over their necks. This alludes to Nurse strangling the patients, obviously, and as stated earlier, was an attempt to purify the patients by freeing them of their shackles. I assume by killing them, so. I'll be giving the Nurse a 10 out of 10 for lore, because goddamn killing over 50 people, mostly strangling them, as well as 4 of the workers inside, is one hefty job and dedication to complete what she started and believed in. So you can tell that this is a person who has become extremely mentally unstable over the years and should probably be in some sort of asylum herself. But yes, 10 out of 10 lore for Nurse, and now we can move on to Mr. Freddy. Freddy Kid Lover Krueger is also average height, has a speed of 4.6 meters a second and a tear radius of 32 meters. So basic stats, except he's a little shorter than other killers. His power, Dream Demon, is actually quite a complex power, so that everyone's on the same page, I'll do my best to go through his power in as much depth, but also simplicity, as I can see, so that people can already know exactly what his power does, but not get bored, as I'm saying it. But people who aren't able to understand what he does and why I'm giving him the score, that's what I'm doing. So, because I'm sure people can agree his power isn't as straightforward as like, hey, look, a chainsaw, whoa, a bear trap. Freddy progressively puts survivors to sleep after a 60-second period, in which they would then be in the dream world. To get out of the dream world, they can wake themselves up by finding an alarm clock around a map, being woken up by other survivors, failing a skill check, or being hooked. You are able to reset your timer before falling asleep by failing a skill check as well. So like when your time is ticking down to go into sleep, you can fail a skill check and it'll reset the clock. So you do that. But before being into the dream world, you won't be able to see Freddy when he's 16 meters or more away from you. But he'll still have his 32 meter terror radius. And then once you're inside Freddy's dream world, he'll be visible across the entire map, so he won't be invisible anymore with that 16 meter radius. But now, although you can see him, his terror radius is replaced by a lullaby, which still operates around a 32 meter radius but cannot be discerned by the survivor of its whereabouts. And when a survivor is in the dream world, they can be affected by some of Freddy's powers depending on what he's chosen. Freddy's base kit allows them to place dream snares down, which slows survivors down by 15% if walked over for 3 seconds. The other ability that can only be accessed if Freddy is using an add-on replaces his dream snares but allows Freddy to place fake pallets down, which can only be seen in the dream world by survivors. Once thrown down, will create an explosion of blood doing absolutely nothing, allowing Freddy to have a free hit basically. Another ability is Freddy is able to get within his power dream projection. Depending on how many survivors are asleep determines how quickly he gains his ability back, but it basically allows Freddy to teleport directly to a generator of his choosing, splurting out blood from the generator, allowing the survivor he's attempting to teleport there. There's a basic rundown of Freddy's power, and because it is a lot of information, I'll quickly recap it right now. So, Freddy is able to bring people into the dream world, where he can then project dream snares on the ground, which slows survivors down by 15% for 3 seconds, or if he chooses over dream snares, he can place fake pallets down around the map. He also possesses the ability to teleport to generator of his choosing, recharging quicker depending on the amount of survivors asleep. So, I feel like after hearing all of this, you all knew what I was going to give Freddy. That's 10 out of 10. He easily has the most versatile ability out of all the killers, being able to perform nearly every kind of action in the game, and is one of the best map control abilities in the game as well. So, even just having a great loop closer ability too. So that and the fact I forgot to mention that with the basic attack from Freddy brings in Dream World, you'll almost always be inside of it, making an easy decision to give him a 10 out of 10 for stats. For strength, I don't believe Freddy to be strong in the slightest. Just looking at his physical appearance, it's obvious he doesn't have a very strong build and is quite small, meaning he doesn't even have at least like a large body frame to support him. So I want to be giving Freddy a 4 out of 10 for strength, as if he was at least bigger in size, you could argue he would have some natural strength to him, but as it is, he clearly doesn't possess or demonstrate any sign of physical strength. Freddy's agility, I would say, is just average, as we know he is amongst the faster killers in base movement speed, meaning he isn't inherently slow, but he doesn't show us that he's able to perform any fast actions. He also doesn't appear to be in the best shape for performing fast movements, being a burn victim, meaning he would definitely have trouble performing some actions swiftly, as burnt skin, last time I checked, isn't ideal in having faster movements. So overall, I think I'll give Freddy 4 out of 10, which might seem harsh, seeming he does have a fast movement speed, but the burns all over his body, harsh ones at that, would have to be somewhat debilitating towards him in the finer movements. Our last category for Freddy, and the fight between him and Nurse in Freddy, is Freddy's Law. So Freddy's Law actually takes place after his first movie. Not too much happens, and doesn't tell us all too much about Freddy, except that he has a deep hatred inside of him. After being killed by Nancy and Quentin, he wants his revenge and finally corners Quentin inside of his dream world, after tormenting him for nights on end inside of his dreams. Once he's about to deliver the final blow on Quentin, he's stripped away by the entity and taken to do his bidding. A little lackluster, if I'm being honest, and kind of displays him as a hothead who doesn't think ahead, even getting beaten by 2 teens because of his rage-induced thoughts and actions. Because of this, I'm only going to give Freddy a 5 out of 10 for Law, because he never actually kills anyone, and the only victims he ever had were when he was alive, and was just a nasty shit he did with kids, which does not in any way give him more points for being a scumbag. So now that we've looked at both killers, we can determine our final victor of today's battle between Nurse and Freddy. Nurse coming in at 26 out of 40 and Freddy 23 out of 40. both killers having our lowest scores so far in the series, but Nurse coming out on top and winning this fight. I'll be honest, I went into this thinking Freddy would come out on top and win it easily, but I really think it was his lore that let him down, and for good reason though, because of Freddy's lack of composure and hatred inside of him. This is a massive downfall to him, as it might help him in having the determination to get the job done, but he has zero planning behind him and sometimes becomes oblivious to what could happen if he doesn't just get the job done, instead of playing with his food. With Nurse being the winner of this battle, we can move on to our next duel, which will be between Huntress and Deathslinger. I do believe that will be an interesting fight. I honestly don't know who would win as of now, so you can start to theorize who you think will win. But until then, bye bye.